I never thought I'd hear those words come out of her mouth. Eleanor. My stepmother. The woman who swept into my life like a perfectly tailored storm and turned everything I knew upside down. The same Eleanor who critiqued my dishwasher loading technique and replaced my beloved comfy couch with something that looked like it belonged in a museum. That Eleanor. Begging me for help. And the reason? Something that would unravel everything I thought I knew about her, about my family, about the very fabric of our lives. Hey there everyone, and welcome back to Real Life, Real Talk. I'm your host Sarah, and today we're diving into a story that I think a lot of you might connect with, the complicated, sometimes messy, but ultimately human experience of family. Specifically, we're going to talk about stepmothers. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Cue the dramatic music, right? Evil stepmother tropes from fairy tales dancing in your head? Well, hold on to that thought, because my story has more twists and turns than a country road in autumn. My life before her was predictable, comfortable, maybe even a little boring, in the way that routines can be. It was just me and my dad after my mom passed away when I was in high school. We had our rhythm, our quiet dinners, our shared love of old movies. Then, like a sudden summer storm, Eleanor arrived. I remember the day Dad told me he was getting remarried. I was 28, living on my own, had a good job as a graphic designer, and thought my days of major family upheaval were behind me. Boy, was I wrong. Eleanor was a force. Tall, with striking silver hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and eyes that seemed to see right through you. She wore tailored clothes, always perfectly put together, a stark contrast to my dad's comfortable but slightly rumpled style. My first impression? Intimidating. She moved in quickly, and our cozy little home suddenly felt different. Eleanor had opinions on everything, from the way I stacked the dishwasher, apparently, my method was inefficient, to the kind of music I listened to, too loud, she said. It felt like my space, my sanctuary, was being invaded. She wasn't overtly mean, not like the wicked stepmothers in stories, but her presence was disruptive. She reorganized the pantry, replaced our comfy old couch with a modern, minimalist one, and even tried to get Dad to eat healthier, which, to be fair, he probably needed. Looking back, I can see that she was trying to make a home their home. But at the time, all I felt was resentment. This was my dad, our house, and this woman, this elegant stranger, was changing everything. It felt like she was trying to erase the memory of my mom, to replace her. Was that fair of me? Probably not. But grief and change can make us act in ways we're not proud of. Have you ever felt like your personal space was being encroached upon, even with good intentions? How did you handle it? The first few months were a constant dance of passive aggression and thinly veiled sarcasm. I'd leave my shoes by the door, knowing it would annoy her. She'd offer me unsolicited advice on my career choices. Dad, bless his heart, tried to play peacemaker, but he was clearly caught in the middle, wanting to make both his wife and his daughter happy. It wasn't working. One evening, it all came to a head. We were having dinner, a meticulously prepared salmon dish with quinoa, courtesy of Eleanor, and I made a comment about how Mom's pot roast was Dad's favorite. It was a low blow, I know. Eleanor's fork clattered against her plate. I'm sure your mother was a wonderful cook, Sarah, she said, her voice tight, but your father needs to watch his cholesterol. He was perfectly healthy before you came along and started policing everything. The words were out before I could stop them. The air in the room crackled with tension. Dad looked miserable, his eyes darting between us. Eleanor stood up, her face pale. Perhaps I should eat in the study, she said, her voice trembling slightly. She picked up her plate and left the room. I watched her go, a hollow feeling in my chest. Part of me felt a surge of satisfaction. I'd finally gotten to her. But another part, a small, still voice, whispered that I'd gone too far. Why was I being so deliberately difficult? Was it really about the pot roast, or was it about something deeper? Have you ever lashed out at someone you cared about, even when you knew you were wrong? What was really going on beneath the surface? Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the house remained thick. Dad and I had a few awkward conversations, where he gently suggested I try to be more accepting of Eleanor. I knew he was right, but it felt so hard. It felt like betraying my mom's memory. One afternoon, I was visiting and found Eleanor sitting on the back porch, tending to her roses. I'd always admired her garden. It was vibrant and meticulously cared for. I hesitated, unsure whether to approach her. But something made me step forward. "The roses look beautiful, Eleanor," I said, my voice a little stiff. She looked up, surprised. A faint smile touched her lips. "Thank you, Sarah. Your mother always had a wonderful garden too, you know." Her words caught me off guard. I'd assumed she never talked about my mom. We stood there for a moment in silence, the only sound the gentle hum of bees. "Dad misses her a lot," I said quietly. Eleanor nodded. "I know he does. And so do you." We started talking, tentatively at first, about the garden, about the weather, about nothing in particular. Then, slowly, the conversation deepened. She told me a little about her life before Dad, about her own struggles and losses. I learned that she had lost her husband several years ago and that she understood what it was like to grieve. It was a side of her I'd never seen before, a vulnerability that chipped away at the wall I'd built between us. Have you ever been surprised by finding common ground with someone you initially disliked? What made the difference? Over the next few months, things started to shift. Not dramatically, but subtly. I started making an effort to be more polite, to listen when Eleanor spoke. I even offered to help her with the gardening a few times. And she, in turn, seemed to soften towards me. She still had her opinions, but she expressed them less forcefully. She even started asking me about my work and seemed genuinely interested. One evening, I was looking through some old photo albums with Dad, and I came across a picture of Mom. Eleanor came into the living room and paused when she saw the photo. "She had a kind face," Eleanor said softly, looking at the picture. "She did," I replied, a pang of sadness mixed with a strange sense of acceptance. Eleanor didn't try to pretend she was Mom, or that she could ever replace her. And that, I realized, was the key. She wasn't trying to erase my mother's memory. She was simply trying to build a new life with my father. And maybe, just maybe, there was room for me in that life too. It wasn't about replacing, but about adding. Have you ever realized that your initial assumptions about someone were completely wrong? What helped you see them in a new light? Life settled into a new kind of normal. Eleanor and I weren't best friends, but we were civil. We could have a conversation without it turning into a battle. I even started to appreciate some of her qualities, her intelligence, her meticulousness, her quiet strength. Then, one Tuesday evening, my phone rang. It was Eleanor. "Sarah, dear, could you possibly come over?" Her voice sounded strained, almost panicked. "Of course, is everything all right?" I asked, my heart suddenly pounding. It's your father. He's had a bit of a fall. Nothing too serious, the doctor says, but, well, I could really use some help." My mind raced. Dad was usually so steady, so capable. "I'll be right there," I said, grabbing my keys. As I drove to their house, a wave of guilt washed over me. All those months of resentment, of keeping Eleanor at arm's length. And now she was the one reaching out for help. In that moment, all the petty grievances seemed to melt away. My dad was hurt, and Eleanor needed me. That was all that mattered. Have you ever had a moment where your priorities suddenly shifted, and old conflicts seemed insignificant? What triggered that change? When I arrived, Dad was propped up in bed, looking pale but managing a weak smile. He'd tripped on a rug and fractured his ankle. It wasn't life-threatening, but he was in a lot of pain and needed help with even the simplest tasks. Eleanor looked utterly exhausted. She'd been up all night with him, trying to manage everything on her own. I immediately jumped into action, helping her make Dad comfortable, bringing him water, and just being there. Over the next few days, I practically moved in. I helped with the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry. I took Dad to his doctor's appointments and made sure he took his medication on time. And I worked alongside Eleanor, side by side, for the first time without any underlying tension. I saw a different side of her during that time. She was fiercely protective of Dad, incredibly patient with him, and surprisingly capable. She handled everything with a quiet determination, even when she was clearly overwhelmed. And I realized that beneath that polished exterior was a woman who loved my father deeply. Have you ever been surprised by someone's strength and resilience in a crisis? What did you learn from that experience? One evening, after Dad had finally fallen asleep, Eleanor and I were sitting in the kitchen, sharing a cup of tea. The silence felt comfortable, not strained. "Thank you, Sarah," she said quietly, her eyes meeting mine. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "Of course, Eleanor," I replied. "He's my dad. I'm happy to help." She hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. There's something else I need to talk to you about." Her voice was barely a whisper. I waited, a sense of unease creeping into my stomach. "It's about my daughter," she said, her gaze dropping to her hands. "Her name is Emily. She's having some trouble." This was the first time Eleanor had ever mentioned having children. I knew so little about her life before Dad. "What kind of trouble?" I asked gently. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She's struggling with addiction. It's been going on for years, and I don't know what to do anymore. I've tried everything." I was stunned. This strong, composed woman was breaking down in front of me, her vulnerability raw and heartbreaking. All the walls I'd built up against her crumbled in that moment. This wasn't the intimidating stepmother I thought I knew. This was a mother, desperate to help her child. Have you ever witnessed someone you thought was strong and in control reveal a deep vulnerability? How did it change your perception of them? Eleanor went on to tell me about Emily, about her bright spirit and the path that had led her to addiction. She'd been in and out of rehab, but nothing seemed to stick. Eleanor had spent years trying to fix it, feeling like a failure as a mother. "I haven't told your father," she confessed, her voice low. "He worries so much as it is. And, well, I was always so ashamed. I didn't want him to think less of me." My heart went out to her. She'd been carrying this burden alone for so long. "Eleanor, Dad loves you," I said gently. "He wouldn't think less of you." "Maybe," she said, her eyes filled with doubt. "But I don't know what to do. I've run out of options." Then, she looked at me, her gaze intense. "Sarah, you're good at things. You're resourceful. You've built a good life for yourself. Do you think you could talk to her? Maybe she'd listen to someone else, someone who isn't me." I was taken aback. She wanted my help? After everything? It was a testament to her desperation, but also, I realized, to a growing trust between us. I don't know, Eleanor," I said honestly. I've never dealt with anything like this before. Please, Sarah, she pleaded, her voice cracking. Just try. For me. For Emily. And then came the twist. Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. It was a picture of a young woman with bright eyes and a warm smile. She looked vaguely familiar. This is Emily, Eleanor said, her voice trembling. I took the photo, and my breath caught in my throat. I knew that smile. I knew those eyes. Because the young woman in the picture was someone I had gone to college with. Someone I had lost touch with years ago. Someone named Emily Carter. But Eleanor's last name was Davies. Why the different last name? And how had I never connected the dots before? Have you ever had a seemingly random connection to someone turn out to be incredibly significant? What were the odds? I stared at the photograph, my mind reeling. Emily Carter. We'd been in the same sorority, shared late-night study sessions, even gone on a spring break trip together. We'd lost touch after graduation, as often happens. But to think that this vibrant, funny girl was Eleanor's daughter, and that she was struggling with addiction, it felt surreal. Eleanor. Emily's last name is Carter in the photo, I said, my voice barely above a whisper when we spoke on the phone later that night. Eleanor sighed. Davies is my maiden name. I remarried after Emily's father passed away when she was young. She kept his last name. It made sense, but the coincidence was still staggering. The world suddenly felt very small. I told Eleanor that I remembered Emily, that we'd been friends in college. A flicker of hope seemed to ignite in her voice. We talked for a long time that night, about Emily, about her struggles, about what I might be able to do. I wasn't a therapist or an addiction specialist, but I was someone who knew Emily, at least the Emily she used to be. Maybe that connection, however tenuous, could make a difference. Have you ever reconnected with someone from your past in an unexpected way? What was that experience like? The next day, I started trying to find Emily. It wasn't easy. Her social media profiles were mostly inactive. But after some digging, I managed to find a recent address. It was in a town a few hours away. I hesitated for a long time before reaching out. What would I say? Would she even remember me? Would she want to hear from me? But Eleanor's desperate plea echoed in my mind. I had to try. I sent Emily a message on social media, a simple, heartfelt message reminding her of our college days and saying that I'd heard she was going through a tough time and wanted to connect. I didn't mention Eleanor. I wanted Emily to feel like this was coming from me. Days turned into a week, and I didn't hear back. I started to lose hope. Maybe it was a long shot. Maybe Emily wouldn't want to talk. But then, one morning, I saw a notification pop up on my phone. It was a message from Emily. Just 2 words, "Hi Sarah." My heart leaped. Have you ever taken a leap of faith and been surprised by the outcome? What motivated you to take that chance? It took a few more messages, but eventually, Emily agreed to meet. I drove to the small town where she was living, my stomach churning with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. When I saw her sitting in the corner of the coffee shop, my heart sank. The bright, vibrant Emily I remembered was gone. This Emily looked tired, worn down, her eyes holding a deep sadness. We talked for hours that day. It wasn't easy. Emily was guarded at first, hesitant to open up. But as we reminisced about our college days, about silly memories and shared experiences, a flicker of the old Emily started to emerge. She eventually started to talk about her struggles, about the pain and the loneliness that had led her to addiction. She admitted that she felt lost and hopeless. I listened without judgment, sharing my own vulnerabilities and struggles. I didn't offer any easy answers or pretend to understand what she was going through, but I let her know that she wasn't alone. I didn't mention Eleanor at first. I wanted Emily to trust me, to feel like I was there for her, not just because her mother had asked me to be. But eventually, the topic came up. Emily's reaction was complicated, a mix of guilt, anger, and a deep longing for connection. Have you ever had a difficult conversation that ultimately led to a deeper understanding? What made it possible to connect on a meaningful level? Over the next few weeks, Emily and I stayed in touch. We talked on the phone, exchanged messages, and even met up a couple more times. Slowly, tentatively, she started to open up to the idea of getting help. I knew that Eleanor was desperate to reconnect with her daughter, but I also knew that Emily needed to feel like she was making this decision for herself. So, I encouraged Emily to reach out to her mom, to start rebuilding that relationship. One evening, I was at Eleanor's house when Emily finally called. I could hear Eleanor's shaky voice as she answered the phone. The conversation was long and emotional, filled with tears and apologies and tentative promises. I left the room to give them some privacy, but I could hear snippets of their conversation, words of love, of forgiveness, of hope. When Eleanor finally came out of the study, her face was tear-streaked but her eyes were shining. She's going to go to a treatment center, she said, her voice choked with emotion. She's finally ready. In that moment, I saw not just a stepmother, but a mother whose heart was overflowing with love and relief. And I realized that our journey, the one that had started with so much conflict and resentment, had led us to this unexpected place of connection and compassion. Have you ever witnessed the power of a mother's love to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles? What does that kind of love look like to you? Emily's journey to recovery was long and challenging, but she was brave and determined. Eleanor and I supported her every step of the way. We visited her at the treatment center, we went to family therapy sessions, and we celebrated every small victory. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks and moments of doubt. But through it all, the bond between Eleanor and Emily grew stronger. And so did the bond between Eleanor and me. We had been brought together by my father, but we were united by our shared love for him and for Emily. Dad's ankle eventually healed, and life settled into a new rhythm once again. But this time, it was different. There was a warmth and a connection in our home that hadn't been there before. Eleanor wasn't just my stepmother, she was a friend, an ally, someone I could count on. And I wasn't just Dad's daughter, I was part of a larger, more complex, but ultimately loving family. Looking back, I realized that Eleanor didn't turn my world upside down in a bad way. She challenged my assumptions, she pushed me out of my comfort zone, and ultimately, she helped me see the world and myself in a new light. And when she needed help, I was finally able to be there for her, not as a resentful stepdaughter, but as a fellow human being. Have you ever found an unexpected connection or friendship in a place you least expected it? What did that teach you about the complexities of human relationships? So, what can we take away from Sarah's story? Maybe it's that first impressions aren't always accurate. Maybe it's that vulnerability can be a bridge to connection. Or maybe it's simply that family, in all its messy and complicated forms, is worth fighting for. What about you? Have you ever had a challenging relationship that ultimately transformed into something positive? What steps did you take, or what changed your perspective? We'd love to hear your stories. Share them with us on our social media or send us an email. Remember, real life is full of unexpected twists and turns, but it's also full of opportunities for growth and connection. Thanks for tuning in to Real Life, Real Talk. Until next time, take care.